Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from the Singapore FinTech Festival, and joining me for this segment, we have Hernán Fernández. He's Managing Partner of Angel Ventures. We're here to discuss the Latin America venture capital business case from the Southeast Asia perspective. It is great to have you with us, Hernán. Welcome to TradeTalks.
Thank you, Jill. Pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about some of the trends and the success cases that you're exploring with this expansion into other markets in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, it's something that we have been following for the past, decade or so. What we see is that entrepreneurship and business models actually do not travel the way that you would expect, and there's this very strong movement about the global South. So basically what we're doing from Latin America is that we're finding that there's certain comparable areas, namely Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Northern Africa, and Latin America, where certain business models thrive, right? Whereas you might have deep tech innovation happening in countries like Israel or China or the US or Europe, and even so in India, what you will find, from the 53 unicorns that have been minted in Southeast Asia, there's almost an exact parallel with the 33 unicorns that actually exist in Latin America. So, fintech obviously takes top prize. There's most of the unicorns in both of these regions are actually fintechs, but what we're seeing is that these business models travel very well to similar countries.
Yeah, there's also similar demographics as well, but what are some of the common misconceptions and misunderstandings about Mexico and the broader Latin American space?
Well, certainly the first thing that is quite shocking is the distance, right? A trip from Buenos Aires to Mexico City can be 13 hours, and going from point A to point B in Asian countries is probably no more than 6 hours, right? So that striking distance is something that a lot of people do not consider. The other thing, obviously, you have to address security, right, or safety. And the thing is, Mexico, for example, that you have a terrible reputation in terms of safety concerns. You have to think that this is the 12th largest economy in the world. It's a huge country. It's over 135 million people, and yeah, there's a lot of isolated states or whatever. There's horrible things going on, right? But let me ask you this: if you were traveling to Miami and you hear about the Boston bombings, will you cancel your trip to Boston? The answer is probably not, right? Or you have all of these visitors coming to Mexico City, and statistically speaking, Mexico City is safer than places like LA or Chicago. And you will never probably get someone asking for your safety or whatever if you make a trip to LA, but in Mexico City you get it all the time, right? Yeah. So you have to understand that there's certainly challenges. There's how the media portrays many of these countries or whatsoever, but certainly it's a great place to do business, and there's a lot of companies, entrepreneurs, thriving and doing amazing companies.
Well, I think it's important to bring up those numbers as well. 135 million looks very different than 5 to 6 million in a smaller nation, as an example, where we are now. What are some of the opportunities to collaborate among the regions?
Yeah, that's something that we're also following very carefully. Obviously, right now Mexico, it's there's a term that you probably have heard ad cansantium, which is nearshoring, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that we're next to the world's largest economy and we're today the U.S. largest trading partner, it's something that's very relevant, right? So there's a lot of factories or companies from all over the world setting foot in Mexico, trying to service the TMEC markets of Canada, the U.S. and Mexico, right? But what they're finding is that Mexico per se, it's a fantastic country also to engage in business. And Mexico is actually the second most open economy in the world, just after Israel, with over 50 free trade agreements. Actually, with Singapore, is part of the Pacific Alliance, and it's a key leader in Spanish-speaking Latin America. So Mexico is certainly open for business, and we have a very strong reputation, and not only that, but also a very diversified economy. It's not only about commodities, it's not only about tourism, it's not only about factories. What you will find in Mexico is actually very, very well represented across different geographies and sectors.
Right, and that was my question I was going to ask you. So you are working, in fact, with regions within Southeast Asia. There are collaborations already existed.
Yes, obviously we run a venture capital fund,
right.
And we do have investors from Southeast Asia. We have over 20 nationalities in our LP tables, and we actually bring a lot of these business ideas or concepts into Latin America, mm-hmm. and we actually like to collaborate very, very closely with our investors. So we're finding that this is very fertile ground to explore business models that have been working in different parts. Maybe it can be China or Indonesia or whatsoever, and bring them over to Latin America. It can be expanding some of these companies into Latin America, or it can be starting a company or finding an entrepreneur in Latin America that's doing the very same business model, and it's conquering a different market.
right, Hernan, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. And thanks for joining me from the Singapore FinTech Festival. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.